that are working on the study.
Great, thank you. Good evening, everybody. So my name is Pat Tayeski, and I'm going to take you through this PowerPoint. The agenda that we have for the PowerPoint, we're going to do some introductions, and then we're going to talk about what the commercial locational criteria is, because it has been in the books for a while. Then we're going to talk about some of the research and analysis process that we went through and the public engagement opportunities that we have had. Then we're going to talk about the proposed changes, which at this point are still draft. And then we're going to go into the specifics of that criteria, and then we're going to have discussion. There will be opportunity to ask questions, provide comments, and then we'll talk about the next steps. So to start, we would
Pat,
like
do you want
to
share your screen?
Of course, thank you, Nick.
Yes, no problem.
Feel
It
like
sounded like you were reading the agenda, but I wasn't sure.
I'm sorry. Yeah, that was the cover. This is the agenda. I'm sorry. Okay, so we're going to start with introductions, and we were expecting a lot of people, so we figured that the easiest way for us to find out who is in attendance would be to do a poll. So it's going to be really easy and simple. But basically, Melissa mentioned with me is Nicholas Hill. He's also a planner with SNME. And so what we're going to do is, if you have a cell phone with you, you can open your camera and point it at that code where it says scan me, and that will open a website where you can provide the answers. If the camera for some reason doesn't work, then you go to your Safari or the internet, what do you call this, the Google or whatever provider you use, and you type pollev.com/CREAD280. And then when you do that, right now it will say waiting for us to provide the questions. So I'm just going to wait a second here to make sure everybody has it. But if you're there, and I'm going to leave that code there for just a second, the first question that we're going to ask is about your zip code. Basically, it's just to give us an idea of where in the county the participants are coming from. And I think somebody just came in, so I'm going to just repeat it just in case. So we're going to do a poll, a very simple poll, to find out where people are coming from in the county. So you can either scan this code with your telephone with the camera, and it will take you to the website, or simply type this address to go to the website, pollev.com/CREAD280. So I'm going to activate the first question so we can start getting some answers. So Nick, if you could please go. Okay, so we're starting to see some zip codes coming in, and it's going to give us a word cloud. Basically, if 10 people are from 33556 and only 2 people are from 32806, then it will show that proportion.
Pat, we have someone in the chat, the Keystone Civic Association, they've got 30 residents from 33556.
Okay, so instead of everybody going through and doing that, then we'll know. All right, perfect. Anybody else who wants to participate in this one? Again, you just scan the code. It will take you to a website, and you can answer the question. Okay, I guess either most people come from that zip code, or we only have that room replying. So I'm going to go to the second question, which I think it's going to be pretty obvious from the zip code. So the next question is, I live in the county, and in what I consider an urban area or a suburban area or a rural area, or maybe you don't live in Hillsborough County. So if you select one of those and submit, it will show up here. If for some reason you hit urban and it was like, oh, no, I meant to say rural, there's a little icon that has a trash can. You can, delete that answer and provide a new answer.
Pat, I think you may need to activate it. It's again.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, so consistent with the zip code, it looks like most of the people in attendance live in the rural area. I'm gonna wait just a couple more seconds here. And if anybody's having a hard time accessing the website or figuring this out, please raise your hand and we can help you go through it. Okay, all right, so we're gonna go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, somebody just popped up. They live in the urban area. And we can always come back to this later if more people come in and want to
Hey, Pat,
participate.
we have a request to pause for a couple of minutes
Sure.
from someone in the chat to kind of catch up.
Okay, sounds good. So
Thank you.
again, you go to that website or you scan the code, and then you will see the question on your screen and you select one of the options.
So yeah, just be aware that when you do go to the website, it will ask you to put in your name or whatever name you want to go by.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be first, last. It can be
Right.
any nickname or any word
That
you
is
can put in.
normal for it to ask for your name, just so it knows for us on the back end who responded.
All right, can we move on, you think? All right, we can always go back later if anybody wants to. All right, so with that in mind, so what is the CLC, the commercial locational criteria? So I mentioned before that it's been in the books for a long time. It's not something that we're trying to implement now. What we're trying to do is modify it. So what we have in the book right now, in the comprehensive plan, is a provision that allows residents to be able to meet their daily needs for goods and services within a reasonable distance from their neighborhoods. And basically, the purpose of what we have in the books now is that those commercial activities should be integrated seamlessly into the neighborhoods. And then the benefit of this program is that when somebody finds the right location that meets all the criteria, they don't need to make a change to the comprehensive plan. They just do a rezoning, and that's all they have to go through. So once that rezoning is approved, your future land use map still shows it as a residential area, but you may have a grocery store or a commercial establishment within that residential area. So again, this is something that we have had in the past. It's not something new to the county. So what do we mean by daily needs? Basically, fresh food, professional services. We can get your haircut or something similar like that. Or maybe it's healthcare. Maybe it's your CVS where you get your medicines. Or it could be a cafe, a restaurant, and right now, even drive-throughs. So that's what we mean by daily needs. So we understand that the county is very diverse. We have urban areas, we have rural areas, and we have the in-between, the suburban area. So we don't expect these, excuse me, commercial establishments to look the same or feel the same or be the same size in all parts of the county. We know that there has to be some variation. So, a neighborhood serving restaurant, for example, could look like that Foxtail on the left. But when we think about a Publix, like a large Publix, we think about it as a community commercial. It means that it serves more than just one neighborhood. Now, when we talk about a regional commercial, what we're talking about is something like a mall that serves the entire community, an entire city or a county or a region. And this is what we think they could look like in an urban area. But in a suburban setting, sometimes they're a little bit different. Like very rarely you will see an IKEA in an urban area. They typically locate more like in the suburban areas where they have more room for their parking and the expansion of the building. But in a neighborhood use in a suburban area could look like a small shopping center at an intersection. And then when it comes to rural, the idea that we have for neighborhood commercial, community commercial is more like your fresh food or maybe the feed store. And we wouldn't expect to see a regional commercial venture in a rural area. That's why we don't have that picture on the third box. Now, again, commercial locational criteria could end up looking in many different ways. So we picked up this example from Bakersfield, California. I went there last year in May, and I stayed with a friend of mine who lives in this cul-de-sac right here. So her house is right there. I needed to go to the drugstore to buy something. And I asked her, I said, is there a drugstore nearby? She said, yeah, it's right next door. I mean, you could walk to it, except that there is a wall separating our neighborhood from that shopping center. So if you want to walk, you would have to pretend that you're a car, walk down the street, out of the neighborhood, go to the main collector road, and walk along that sidewalk, and then go through the parking lot to get to the place. And this is what that looked like. I ended up driving because it didn't look very appealing to me. So here's another example. And again, these are extreme examples. This is in Orlando, in downtown. It's a historic district. So there are a lot of single family homes. And right in the middle of those single family homes, there is a corner store. They have fresh food, some groceries, and they also have the opportunity for people to sit outside and consume some of the products. The scale of this building is consistent with the single family homes around. It fits in. So one of the things that we want to do as we improve the commercial locational criteria is to make sure that the setting is right. The setting fits in with the surrounding neighborhoods. Now, when staff approached us about updating the commercial locational criteria, there were some things that they had in mind in terms of what kind of improvement they wanted to see. Number one, the language has been there for so long that some of it has become outdated. So we needed to make sure that we refresh that section. Number two, there have been a number of waiver requests. So they needed us to look at those waiver requests and find out, why are people asking for waivers? What is the reason? Is that something that needs to be changed? Number three, the commercial landscape has changed a lot in the past few years, especially in the past two. And we wanted to make sure that we've reflected that. And also, a lot of people that we have talked to, they would like to be able to walk to the store, to buy to the store. They don't want to just to have to get in the car to go buy a gallon of milk. So that was something that we wanted to address. And then the number four, it was to make sure that these corner shopping centers would be integrated into the neighborhoods, avoiding the Bakersfield example where you have a barrier that prevents you from really using that neighborhood store that was put there for you. So we did some background analysis. We looked at all the planning documents that have been adopted in the past that related to this topic. And one of the things that we did, we went through all the community plans that have been prepared for the county, trying to understand, what these community plans were calling for. And we found interesting things, like some of these plans already say, we want commercial at this node, named intersections, and we don't want commercial anywhere else. Well, that's going to be respected. We understand that, and it's not the intent of this to all of a sudden supersede those community plans. The community was involved when they prepared them, and they will be respected. Something else that they wanted us to address was the transportation, being able to get there with different modes of transportation and being able to communicate to the neighborhoods around. So we looked at some of those documents, and a lot of them call for that. So we want to be consistent with those documents. And then, related to the community plans, the CLC is not going to be welcome everywhere. So we wanted to make sure that we were not going to have any conflicts with that. There is a public process. Public meetings will be held for the rezoning. So it's not something that's going to happen overnight. People are not going to be able to just come in and get a permit. We also looked around the country to see, is anybody else doing this? The idea of allowing commercial in a residential zone with just going through the rezoning process. And not many people are doing this out there. But the few that we found that do it, they do require the rezoning to a commercial district. And then they also have some standards for compatibility, buffering, and locational requirements. So that's consistent with what we're proposing. Now we have a website for the project, and that is the address. And at the very end of the presentation, I'll show you the QR code so you can scan it and have it on your phone. But this website has been very helpful for us to get comments from people. First, we did a public survey, and I know we had some issues with one of the questions where it didn't provide another alternative for the question, but we're aware of that, and we have made adjustments to address that. And we also had a community idea wall where people could come in and just give us comments, any comments. People could come in and just type, I agree with connecting them to the neighborhoods, but, make sure that we have appropriate bicycle connections or, things of that sort. And they were able to provide some pictures too of places that they wanted to look like or that we should consider. Now, those two methods of input have been closed already, but we would still welcome comments. And we'll have Andrea's email at the end of the presentation so you can talk to her directly with any comments or questions that you may have. Now, this website is still active because all the summaries from the meetings that we have had and all the videos that we have recorded from all these meetings, they are available there. So if you missed the previous meetings, you want to go and check to see what other people had to say, you can go in and take a look. Other activities that we conducted in terms of public engagement. So we have had 2 briefings with the Planning Commission. We had one information session back in November, and then the latest one was part of the update of the briefings that the staff had with them regarding the comprehensive plan. And then we also have had 3 community meetings. This is the 3rd one. We had the first one in November, then we had one in January, and then this one. We, at the very beginning of the project in October, we had 3 stakeholder sessions, and these were people that staff contacted and asked them to please participate in an input session so they can give us some comments. And then the Board of County Commissioners, they had individual briefings, 6 of them, with 6 of the commissioners. And then they also had a workshop that was part of the plan amendment cycle just recently. What have we heard from all these public involvement activities? Again, people want accessibility, connectivity, but it has to be context sensitive. It depends on where you're located. We know that people in the rural area are not expected to walk to the corner store, but in the urban area you are. They wanted us to. There was a really interesting comment about some communities in the county don't have access to fresh food. They don't have access to a grocery store. And they wanted us to take an opportunity of this commercial locational criteria to facilitate that. So to like give incentives for this to happen. We heard that people are willing to walk as long as the facilities are available and appropriate. Shade, wide sidewalks, not walking right next to the moving traffic. And then also, again, empowering the communities to determine the appropriateness of the commercial locational criteria within their neighborhoods. Some of the community meetings, any other comments that we heard, it was, please make sure that nothing you do with the commercial locational criteria is going to be in conflict with the community plans. So we spelled that out. That's right now, it's not noted in the comprehensive plan that you have to do that. So we're adding specific language that says that whoever comes in for a rezoning, they have to be consistent with the community plans. Let's see what else. And also the connections. So like that Bakersfield example, it is very difficult when you have an established subdivision to go in and put in the connection. People don't like that. But if the subdivision is new and it is designed in a way that they can be connected or integrated together, we want to do that. So people can get to that store without having to go to the main road. And then we are cognizant that buffers will be necessary, especially in certain areas like the suburban area, when you live in the urban area, people don't really mind living next to commercial, but when it comes to the suburban subdivisions, people do care about that. So now, proposed changes. So what is it that we're changing right now? So, right, like as I mentioned, this has been in the comprehensive plan for many, many years. And basically what it says is that depending on whether you're in the urban, suburban, or rural area, you get an allotment of square footage. And in some parts of the county right now, we allow 175,000 square feet. That's almost like the size of an IKEA. And we don't have any standards for what that would look like. And it could be an IKEA, it could be a home store, like a home improvement center, or it could be a grocery store, or it could be a car repair. We don't really have anything that would narrow the use to being just neighborhood service uses. So we're proposing that if you're going to be able to locate in residential areas, that you're going to be limited to neighborhood serving uses. And even auto-oriented uses like drive-throughs and gas stations would not be allowed. So here we're talking about the lower density residential areas of the county. Something else that we're proposing is, okay, so in some areas you can do 175,000 square feet, but make sure that that's broken down into smaller stores. So the largest establishment that you could have is a grocery store up to 50,000 square feet, but all the other tenants would have to be 20,000 square feet. So what this does is it prevents the big box coming to a neighborhood, near you. And then if you have, let's say you're proposing a mega Publix and it's 60,000 square feet or more, well, it's not like we're going to say no. The only thing we're asking is like, you're going to have to go through a future land use map amendment to show that that corner is commercial. Because once you get to that side, we don't consider that as part of the neighborhood. It needs to be shown as a commercial on the map. And then, of course, the rezoning. Everybody would have to go through the rezoning too. And then something else that we're proposing is design standards. And this is particularly important to make sure that these developments are pedestrian friendly, that they're quality development, that they're going to be consistent with the surrounding neighborhoods. We don't want just, Main Street USA, the same shopping center that you get in, Sarasota County or Dade County to just come and locate the buildings here. They need to be sensitive to the context that we have in the county. In terms of the waiver request, I mentioned before that it has been interesting because staff has been getting a lot of waiver requests, and we want to narrow that down a little bit to building placement and distance between nodes. Now, building placement is because I talked about how in the urban area and some of the suburban areas, we want the buildings closer to the street, more pedestrian friendly, but we wouldn't require that in a rural area, of course. But if somebody comes in an urban area and they want to do something very suburban, building in the back, sea of parking in the front, that would not be an option that we want to entertain. And the distance from other nodes is that, technically you could pretty much put a node in every intersection in the county, but we don't want the county to end up with roads lined up with retail. So we are setting some standards that would prevent them from being too close to each other. The next topic is that when we were doing all this, it was sounding great until we realized that, wait, where is the new Publix that is 65,000, 70,000 square feet? Where is that Publix going to go? Because we don't have a land use category that would accommodate that. So we're having to propose a new mixed use future land use category to accommodate those that are not going to meet the CLC, but could be located in some of these areas. And then the last thing is what I mentioned before, that we are specifically requiring consistency with the community plans. That's something that we heard from the community. We want to put it in writing so that somebody says, oh, forget about the community plan. It's a good idea to put this Publix or Aldi's or whatever at this corner and ignore what the community plan said. So that's going to be spelled out. This table that I'm going to show you, it's going to look complicated, but it's just to give you an idea of how we're organizing our thoughts. And it is draft at this point. It has not been completely vetted. It has not been finalized, but it's just to give you an idea of how we're organizing this system. So on the left, you see that we have neighborhood, community, and regional. So these are the scales of commercial that you could have in any community. Neighborhood, serving just one or two neighborhoods. Community, it's kind of like the super Target or super Walmart that serves several neighborhoods. And regional, it's, possibly the whole county. So starting with the neighborhood, one thing that I failed to mention before, so the purpose of the commercial locational criteria is not just to locate neighborhood commercial next to residential neighborhoods, but also in industrial areas. Because what has happened is that if you have a huge industrial area, lots of workers, where do they go for lunch? Where do they go to buy a Band-Aid if they need to? Where do they go to, buy something on the way out from work, on their way home? So it is part of the current commercial locational criteria, and we agree the way it is set up today, and we want to keep it that way. Basically, we allow up to 30,000 square feet of neighborhood commercial if you're located in an industrial district. And all they have to do is a rezoning. The next level, these are the lowest density agriculture and residential land use categories that you have in the county. These are the ones that we want to take care of. These are the ones that we want to adjust. So for those areas, what we're proposing is 40,000 square foot maximum. And we're still debating whether we should have a maximum size per tenant so that somebody doesn't just come in and put 40,000 square feet of something that is not related to groceries or personal services. So, and this distance, this is what we have in the plan right now that talks about concentrating commercial at nodes, at intersections. If you go beyond the 660 feet, you're starting to get into, a quarter type of situation, not a node. The next, and something else to mention here. So one major change that we're making here for this is that we're going to allow the neighborhood commercial uses, but limited. Basically, what it says is any commercial neighborhood level use except for auto-oriented uses. So that's a change. Now, the next grouping basically is your residential categories 4 to 6, or 4 to 9, sorry. Now we're increasing the size consistent with what we have today to 110, 175. But now we're talking about tenant restrictions. So we want to encourage groceries. That's the main purpose of this. So we let those go up to 50, but any other tenants would have to stay at 20,000 square feet. And then we keep going up like this to, okay, now it's community. I forgot about this one. So this is the new category that we had to create to be able to allow a Publix that doesn't fit into this limited use criteria. And then for the community level, so these are the places of the county where you have higher density categories, 12 up to 35. So when you live in those areas, you expect urban development. So we're not as concerned in those areas in terms of, it has to be neighborhood limited commercial. It could be just any neighborhood commercial that we list in the code. And then the last one is the regional. Of course, this is where you would expect to, have the malls and the big, large shopping centers and the IKEAs. So we don't have restrictions for, in terms of square footage. But again, these are not, strictly residential categories. So again, it's a complicated table, but it's intended to communicate the fact that we're trying to organize it in levels, that as you get denser, it's going to be more flexible and larger and, less restricted in terms of uses. But as you get closer to the rural areas, it's going to be smaller or more controlled. Now, right now, basically what you have to do to locate one of these uses, you have to look at a map that shows the classification of your roadway. And if you have the right classification and you have the right land use category, then you go and you ask for your rezoning. That's something else that we want to change, because the map that has been used in the past was not working. it was one of the reasons why we got so many waiver requests. So we want to start using a new map that the county created that classifies roadways based on the context. So these roadways can be urban, suburban, or rural, depending on the area that they're traveling through. Now, this is not the official map. This is not an official map anywhere in the county. This is just something that we put together to try to understand, okay, so if I combine that context classification with the future land use classification, what are we getting? And again, like when you see a map like this, you realize like every time two roads cross, you could have a commercial establishment. That's a lot. So that's why we want to talk about separation. And that's why we want to talk about what would it look like in a rural area versus an urban area. We talked about the distance from the intersection. The purpose of it is to create nodes instead of endless corridors of commercial. And this is how it's measured. And then this is just showing graphically how if you're in rural areas or the very low density residential areas, you get up to 40,000 square feet at the corner or within 660 feet from the corner. You could have a lot right here that is not right at the corner, but you could, still do it as long as you're within that distance. Industrial category is 30,000. The lower residential categories, 110,000 with restrictions for tenants, and the higher density residential and mixed use, then that's the largest that you could have. And then we may have some restrictions for tenants too. And then in terms of the separation, what we're proposing right now, and we're still discussing this with staff, is that if you're in a very urban or suburban area, they should be no closer than 1 mile. And then if you're in the rural area or industrial, agricultural area, then it would be 2 miles. Now, I also mentioned that we were going to have some standards for design. So we are going to be addressing building placement because we don't want this scenario where you have to pretend like you're a car and walk in through the drive, through the parking lot to get to the store. We want to make these buildings accessible to the pedestrians too. Addressing the site access and circulation that I mentioned so many times, compatibility with the neighborhoods. We're going to talk about building design. And again, any special district that already has standards, we're not going to touch those. Those will be, will supersede the commercial locational criteria. Now, this picture on the bottom right, it's a simulation that we created for another project, but it shows that even though we have some areas that are very suburban, auto-oriented in nature, could be transformed. There's no need to have driveways that, extend for so many, lineal feet, or there's no need to have parking in the front that separates the buildings from the sidewalks. And when you start transforming that, you realize that you're making these areas more pedestrian friendly. People will walk this, they will not walk that. And they'll bike these areas too. So that's just a simulation intended to show that. Now, in terms of building design, this is something that the county does for other areas or zoning districts in the county, but we wanted to address massing. We don't want the big boxes. We want to address the facades. We don't want blank facades. There has to be some articulation. The proportion of windows to blank walls. We want to address landscaping, screening, lighting, site lighting, starting to think about the pedestrian, not just the cars. And low impact development practices, green roofs, rain gardens, those types of techniques would be encouraged. So with that, the next steps that we're gonna have include, revising the draft with the comments that we get today, any comments that we get from staff. We are doing a case study analysis. We selected 3 intersections in the county randomly, and we're going to do like a before and after situation where we can say, well, right now there is a Publix and some stores at this corner. Let's see what that would look like if we were to apply these new standards. So that should be an interesting visual exercise. And then the plan right now is that we're going to have public hearings with the Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners between August and October. So that's the plan right now. And then for this slide, this is the contact information. Basically, if you have any comments, questions, ideas, we would appreciate if you send them through Andrea's email rather than trying to contact us directly. So her email address is on the screen. And these are the QR codes if you want to visit the websites. Either one of those will take you to the project website where you can read comments, look at some of the research, and there is a draft of the CLC posted on the website right now. So, you know, you're welcome to visit those. And with that, what I would like to do is, if anybody has any questions, comments, suggestions, if you raise your hand with the Microsoft Teams tools, and then we'll go one by one and try to address as many comments as we can today. So, Andrea and Melissa, do you guys see anybody, or Nick?
I think it'd be helpful if Melissa just kind of summarized her previous response to someone who asked if someone asked for a rezoning, which conflicts with a community plan. Will the rezoning applications be rejected outright, or will it still be allowed to be processed through the system?
Yes, I'd be happy to read that response. So Elizabeth Belcher asked that question in the chat. And while Pat was doing her presentation, I wanted to make sure her question got answered. So I put it in the chat that if a request, a zoning request is inconsistent with a community plan, the overall rezoning is typically found inconsistent by Planning Commission staff. And then presented at the zoning hearing master and then subsequently to the Board of County Commissioners. What I was saying is the important thing to focus on here in this conversation, in conjunction with the commercial locational criteria study, is that this study will not change the community plans in any way. The community plans will remain adopted and intact as they are today, including policy direction on where communities want to see commercial and other uses. And then I added that, for instance, to give everyone an example, Lutz's community plan includes 3 commercial nodes along Highway 41 where they want to see those types of commercial uses. There's Lutz's historic downtown area to Newburgh, Crystal Lake Road to Sunset Lane, and then the third one is Crenshaw Lake Road area. So that will not change. Neither will any of the other 21 community plans, because there's 22 total. This won't change any of that adopted language. And actually, to be honest, in the past, our current commercial locational criteria adopted language is absent, doesn't really speak to the community plans. So as staff, it's been when you don't have policy language to support something, there's a little bit of a vacuum there. So we always knew that was something that was missing that we needed to clarify, that they really shouldn't be in conflict. They should be working in tandem with one another, which is where we're headed today.
And I know we had some questions regarding community meetings. Melissa, I'm sure you just saw the one that just came in, the follow-up question from Jake. Would you be able to answer that one as well?
Sure. This is our 3rd community meeting. We had one in November, and in that one was 100% virtual, and we had a decent turnout for that. We had another one that was a hybrid in January. So we had some people, we actually had one person come for that one because of the pandemic. I'm sure we had more staff people than actual people show up. But we had several people online. So it was a hybrid virtual and in-person meeting. And then this is our 3rd community meeting that we added, just getting feedback from various people and the Board of County Commissioners and the Planning Commissioners. Just with the iterations and the drafts, we thought it made sense to add another community meeting. So that's why we're here today.
Yep. And Jake actually followed up with, so we won't have another community engagement meeting once the final version is released, is essentially what he asked.
No, we will not, but we will have the two public hearings. The transmittal hearing will be in August at the Board of County Commissioners. We'll also have the public hearing at the Planning Commission, those dates. And Andrea can post those exact dates in the chat, so everyone has those. I just don't know them off the top of my head. And then we will come back to the board for the adoption in October. So there's still 3 public hearings that will occur. These are all in addition, this is outreach in addition to the traditional public hearing setting.
And the draft will be posted on the website, on the
Mhm.
project website ahead of the meetings.
Yes.
And
And
then
we should have draft 4 by the end of the month, around like the 22nd or so. That should be up on our website for everyone to review it.
we did get another chat comment, and then thank you everyone for who's raising their hand. We'll be sure to get to you as well. One comment just came in that said, this presentation appears to assume that only retail establishments are subject to commercial locational criteria. Pat, do you want to follow up on that? It seems like you have a response.
Yes, so typically what staff has done in the past, they have referred to the list of uses that are permitted in the neighborhood commercial zoning district. And that includes more than just retail. Another major use that would be permitted is office. Now, we don't want these major intersections to be occupied by just office buildings, because the main purpose, like I mentioned before, was to serve the primary needs like groceries, health items. So in the language, we have been talking about allowing office as a secondary use. Means once you have your Publix or your Trader Joe's or your Aldi's, then you could still have an office, but it's not going to be as large as that grocery store. So yes, offices would also be allowed. I don't know if something that has been asked before that sometimes it's a little bit confusing is daycare centers, churches, what are the schools. Those are not considered neighborhood services because they are like in a completely different category. They're the residential support uses.
Yeah.
So they're handled differently. They don't have to go through a rezoning. They don't have to go through the CLC to get those approved. So, basically that list of uses that appear in the zoning code for the CN district, that's the list that you would refer to. And then when we talked about limiting some of those uses, it was to limit to prohibit those that are auto-oriented, anything that is drive-through, gas station, those types of uses would specifically be excluded from the CLC, from the lower density residential areas.
We actually, oh,
Go ahead.
we actually got another comment from Todd Josko, who says, I live in a residential area. There's a Chick-fil-A nearby. Their drive-through is always full, which means it's a popular option for the neighborhood. Why is that something we want to now discourage?
They can still have them, but those would be commercial uses. They would still have to be, going through a process that makes them a commercial use. Because basically when we talk about neighborhood services, is to just meet the needs of those neighbors around the node. And the idea is to make them designed in a way that they're going to be pedestrian friendly, that people are encouraged to walk to these places. So that was one of the main reasons. And also, there are other places in the county where these drive-throughs and gas stations could locate. They don't necessarily have to be in the residential areas. That's the differentiation that we're trying to make.
So I think we are getting more comments in the chat. However, I know some people have been having their hand raised since the beginning, and I want to make sure that they've been listened to. So I know, Elizabeth, you've had your hand raised earlier in the meeting. Did you have a follow-up question? And if so, you're welcome to unmute yourself. I gave you permission to do so.
I hope I'm the Elizabeth. Can you hear me?
I
Yes.
can. Thank
Okay.
you so much.
I'm on my
Listen.
cell phone, so the keypad thing's not going to work for me. During this study, I'm not sure how long it's been going on or where it's ended, but we all know the last couple of years have been very different with COVID and people working from home. I know I do. I'm #1 Amazon girl. Did your study include e-commerce, online ordering? I can call Amazon and shop. I can call Publix and have my items delivered, DoorDash, Uber Eats, whatever. I guess my concern is you're going to build this building and then it goes under, because we saw during COVID how many restaurants and shops couldn't survive. Then someone else is going to move into that property since it's already built, and you've already kind of set the precedent for a commercial property. Has e-commerce come into your planning at all? Or shopping online or online services, which is where I think a lot of people also use. I mean, I'd rather have DoorDash give me food than go to a public park and eat it than sitting in a restaurant. I mean, that's just me, but I'm just wondering if your survey and all your work address that.
Yeah, we know that, some of the shopping trends are changing, but there are still, a lot of people who will prefer to do the, in-person shopping, especially when it comes to groceries. And now one of the trends has also been where you get your Amazon packets at a CVS or at a Publix, where they have those stations where, instead of having the packet delivered to your house and get it stolen by the Porsche pirates, they, send them to these commercial establishments. So, that would accommodate that. And like, we are not trying to, the market dictates a lot of, what happens. So somebody's not going to come in and build a grocery store if they don't have the support clientele around it. They all have their formulas. They need to have so many rooftops before they do it. Everybody wants a Trader Joe's, but a Trader Joe's is not going to go to a specific location unless the location meets their criteria. So, we do not incorporate that into what we write because that's something that it is assumed that the developer would do. Now, we do understand that, we want to make it easier for the mom and pop, the locals. We want to make it easier for the grocery stores to locate close to the people who need it. That's the angle that we're taking. We're facilitating that. That's how we see it. It's, sometimes it's like, if you build it, they will come. In our case, it's like if we write it, they may come. So that's the hope. That's what we're trying to do. And also trying to avoid the proliferation of uses that have nothing to do with neighborhoods at all these intersections. Because really today you can have 175,000 square feet of whatever, right next to your subdivision. And we're like, but why? Why do we need that? There are other places in the county where you should be doing that. So it is okay to have the mixed use, but in a manner that makes the most sense. We want to reserve those corners for grocery stores, for, fresh foods, for the, market, fresh markets that can pop up in the neighborhoods.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we know Elizabeth Belcher was one of the first people that provided a question, and that was earlier on, but she's also in line next for a follow-up question. So Ms. Belcher, if you don't mind.
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, there's a thing about the locational criteria. Right now it's 600 feet. I think the 1,000, especially out here in the semi-rural area, is way too much. But going back to the 600, and this is kind of complicated, and I don't know that much about the zoning process. But what I've been seeing is when a developer wants to come in and build something commercial, his excuse is, well, it's within the locational criteria of 600 feet. And even though what he's doing is not zoned for that, he gets approval. And then somebody else comes along and does the same thing. And pretty much before you know it, we have this whole slew of commercial stuff way beyond the first 600 feet. How is this going to be addressed?
So right now, the way it's written, it is 660 feet for the rural and the rural estate areas. It goes up to 900 feet if you're in suburban areas, and it goes up to 1,000 feet if you're in the urban area. So it depends on the area of the county where you're at. There is also a provision that says that, let's say your property is like caught right in the middle of that line, of the 660-foot line, and a proportion of your site is outside that line. The county will let you do it only because your property is that size, and at least 75% of your property is within the line, so they'll allow you to do it. So in reality, that 660 could grow a little bit depending on the size of that parcel. So that's something that it's already incorporated into the language, and we're preserving that to avoid those conflicts. Now, going outside those numbers, I don't know if Melissa or Andrea, if you have any examples of waivers that have been approved for that, but that would be the only way that you could go outside of that distance and have something built. Because right now we're not considering that. Have we had any waivers approved for anything that is beyond the 660 or the 1,000?
We'd have to research that, and typically in the rural areas, I would say, and I'm generalizing here without a specific site, but I would think there'd be compatibility concerns if someone wanted to go beyond the node, because the development pattern in the rural area is typically, agricultural uses, large lot residential. So in those areas, it wouldn't be appropriate to have a non-residential use. So that's why in those areas, we would especially want to focus the non-residential uses at intersections.
Okay, but the thing about it is, and I'm thinking of a specific location, it's Res 4 right now. It's out, and if it's abutting the 660, the commercial, but it's not included in that, basically they're using that excuse that, well, it's within, they're trying to, I don't know, ooze into another location and then go from there to, if it's abutting the commercial, then they say it's compatible, so we should be allowed to rezone to commercial there. Does that make sense? I'm sorry.
It does make sense, but we also have policies about the transition of use. So the most intensive uses should be concentrated at intersections, and then even if you're within the nodal distance, toward the end of the node, you should be tapering down in intensity. So if you have, you have a grocery store on the corner, maybe the edge of the node has office, or maybe it has a daycare, a residential support use, something like that. That's the way our policy language is written today. And that's what we use when we do our consistency reviews for rezonings.
But yeah, people would not be allowed to go beyond that distance. And just for a point of clarification, for residential 4, the distance is 900 feet. So they would have to stay within the 900 feet. They could not go beyond that.
Okay.
And Elizabeth, I'd be happy to talk to you. There's my number right there. If you want to give me a call tomorrow and you want to dig into a site with me or a specific rezoning, I'd be happy to talk to you tomorrow if you want to give me a call.
Oh, okay. I don't see your telephone number. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, you're on the phone.
I'll put it in the chat, or I can tell you.
Okay, yes, please put it in the chat.
I will.
Thank you very much for that question, Elizabeth. We really appreciate it. Before we go back to the comments, because we've gotten a few more questions from there, I just want to recognize Isabel Albert, if I'm saying that name correctly. If you want to go ahead and speak, you are more than welcome to.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Fortunately, I don't have a lot of comments about the proposal since I was not aware that this was actually happening. I only found out about it this week. But it sounds like this is the last public meeting. Is that correct?
Community
this
meeting.
is the 3rd community meeting, but we still have 3 public hearings because this is part of a plan amendment cycle.
Right. So it's it's more like the public, not the public meeting, but the community meeting.
Yes, this is the 3rd community meeting.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then I think I heard from Melissa saying that earlier there was not that many people that showed up. And I'm starting to think for me, I'm in the field of doing planning, I do apply for commercial location criteria waivers, or I look at that, and I did not know about this meeting. So is there any way that you can allow some of us to take a look at this and have maybe more input into this?
What I would say is, when I mean, there's a draft up right now, the draft 3, and there'll be some changes for draft 4. We can you can provide some input, send me an email, send Andrea an email, give us a call on either of the drafts. And then, our doors are open. You can give us a call anytime, and we'd be happy to take your comments, and discuss them with the consultants. We have another meeting set up, and I know Cammie's on this call right now. Cammie Corbett asked for another meeting with her and I think some commercial development folks, and we're having that next Friday. And since I set up the meeting, I see when they get forwarded, and she's forwarded them to several people that are applicants' representatives typically for rezonings and plan amendments. So, I mean, we can forward you that invite and you can come to that one as well. That's during the day. It's not a community meeting per se, but just a meeting that she had asked for to get some clarification on some items. So I'm happy to invite you to that as well.
Okay, but then I could also reach out to you
Oh,
or
of course.
staff and just with questions
Yeah.
and yeah.
Yep, anytime.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for your comment. We really appreciate that. Just to go back to the chat really quick, I think we have a few comments that I'd just like to get through some of them before we go back to some of the in-person questions. So Cammie has replied once again and said, a typical new medical office for major medical providers in the area are already struggling to find sites for their facility. Limiting them further to no more than 20,000 square feet and only as a secondary use to retail seems to send the message that these types of facilities are not needed or wanted in the county.
Again, like the work that we're doing is to facilitate, to make it easier for neighborhood commercial uses to locate in residential areas. There are other land use categories that would allow the office uses that would not, the map would show them as a commercial site. So that's the part that has been a little bit difficult to understand, that this is the focus of this study is basically to give an incentive to those grocery stores, to the fresh market establishments to locate close to their residents. There are other land use categories, and with the new land use category that we're creating, there may be other opportunities to locate office uses. And just like in every other county in the state, you start with a lot of agricultural, land. Little by little, it transforms into suburban, and then they get, residential categories, and then little by little they start transforming from residential to either office or commercial uses. So it's not something that the county would do, that just, go and change the categories for sites here and there. It's typically owner initiated. So if anybody finds a site that is has a residential land use category, they can always come in and request a change to one of the mixed use districts or one of the categories that could allow office. And that was one of the reasons why we wanted to create that NMU 6 land use category, to try to catch those uses that do not meet the purpose of what we're trying to do, but could accommodate those single uses.
Okay.
Before we get back to some of the recorded questions, I just wanted to answer one more comment question. Is there any correlation between a type of commercial allowed and what the area requires? A good example, rural areas of Keystone, where establishments like Dunkin' Donuts and nationwide chain restaurants would like to open.
Let's see. Melissa, do you have any?
It sounds like what he's asking, is there a differentiation between the commercial uses? And I think what you're getting at is like a Dunkin' Donuts, they typically have drive-through, so they'd be more auto-centric. So those are the ones that we're saying are not neighborhood serving. And those would not be allowed in the lower intensity residential future land use categories.
But if they don't have the drive-through, they're welcome.
Yes.
The local donut shop that doesn't have the
Yes, good
drive-through,
clarification.
they're welcome. Okay.
All right, and I think we can go back to some of the good folks waiting with their hands raised. Yvonne, you've been waiting for a while. Do you want to comment? Okay, I'm not hearing a response yet, but we will keep your hand raised and we'll come back to you. Elizabeth White, you've re-raised your hand. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I want to follow up on the Dunkin' Donuts. First off, I'm sure that came from one of my friends and neighbors. There's about 30 people wearing yellow. I just want to put that, make sure that that gets in the minutes. From Keystone, I'm in a separate location. We have a proposed development, including a Dunkin' Donuts. It would be in a 4,000 to 5,000 square foot building. Only retail, but the Dunkin' Donuts with the drive-through would also be there. I think our concern is in Keystone, it's a rural community and we have all these services very close. I can go to 8 grocery stores in 5 miles. Everything's close. Our concern is for a Dunkin' Donuts or a big box store or something coming to our rural community and building. They're not needed. So that's kind of what we have a concern right now, because where they're proposing to build it's a drive-through. It's not really, the residents won't take advantage of it. It's going to decimate some of our natural resources that we have. And so we're concerned with on this meeting that how that would affect us as a Keystone rural community.
So I don't know, Melissa, because you're probably more familiar with the Keystone community plan in terms of, how it would affect that.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is, I'm not familiar with the application that you're talking about, but just like I offered Elizabeth, if you want to take my number down and give me a call tomorrow, I'm happy to talk about individual rezonings and questions with people. But from just a general answer perspective, the community plans are not changing. So the Keystone Odessa community plan, it's not budging. The CLC is not touching the nodes that are listed, the North Mobley, those types of things are not being touched with this study. So those will still be honored as part of the community plan vision. And again, not changing.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Now, the question comes up though, if there is an application already in the works, so this new CLC language is not adopted yet, but if something is already going through, it could get approved before we even get this new language approved. If they decide to approve it.
That is a good point. Yes, this is the new commercial locational criteria language is part of a comprehensive plan text amendment. So that changes that potentially will change the text of the future land use element of the comprehensive plan, incorporating this new language. And that language, if approved, transmitted to the state, comes back to the board and is adopted, which is our plan, of course, as staff, because we're supporting this, would have an effective date. It's generally, I think it's 30 days after the adoption date. So conceivably, if we stay on schedule, knock on wood, that would be sometime in late November. So any rezoning applications that came in before the effective date of the amendment, they would basically have to do the current CLC, which would then become the old CLC. And then any application that was submitted after the effective date of the amendment, that would get folded into the new language, assuming it's adopted.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Melissa, for that context. Yvonne, I want to give you another chance to respond. I noticed you unmuted yourself for a second. So if you want to unmute yourself again.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm unmuted now.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for coming.
I was wondering, in the development of the proposed changes, I'm also in the Keystone Odessa area, and I know that there are properties that have been zoned commercial and have not yet been developed, and other planned developments that have not been developed yet. Will this new zoning land use plan potentially increase or decrease the amount of commercial in the Keystone Odessa area, theoretically, based on what's being proposed?
Well, I'm not an attorney. I know there's some attorneys on this call, but it is my understanding that any land that's entitled with an approved plan development or has a commercial zoning, those would have to be honored because they're entitlements. But then anything new would need to adhere to, again, assumably the new commercial locational criteria. So anything that's there already or could be there already today, that's the situation that wouldn't change.
Okay, but as a follow-up, if a corner, a quad, as you called it, is currently residential, but it's an area that the planning commission, the plan proposed change would say this should be commercial or be allowed to be commercial, would that not be changed then because of the Keystone Community Plan, or would that be identified as a potential commercial location and be consistent?
You mean for a plan amendment?
Yeah, if there's a property on a intersection that's right now residential, but it's vacant, and this new development, the new development plan for rural areas says that this kind of an intersection should be allowed to have 40,000 square feet of commercial. How does that interact with the Keystone Community Plan if it's not spelled out? Is that going to then be encouraged to be commercial instead of residential?
So if an intersection meets commercial locational criteria, whether it's today or the new language, and a lot of the intersections will stay the same, but if it does meet it today, staff could still potentially support an application. I mean, a lot of it, there's a lot of analysis that goes into an application and a consistency finding besides, is it listed in the community plan as a node? We look at compatibility, we look at, the environmental situation, all those kinds of things. But if right now, if there's an intersection that's not listed in Keystone, but meets commercial locational criteria, yes, it still could be considered for commercial. But again, I see this chat here about wanting to keep, Keystone rural, and I completely understand that. And I know that, the community plan vision, talks about keeping that rural character. So it's something that staff looks at and is very sensitive to. But technically, yes, if an intersection is not listed in the Keystone Plan or the Lutz Plan or the Greater Palm River Plan or any of the other community plans, and they technically are at a qualifying intersection that meets commercial locational criteria, that can be considered for a non-residential use. Yes.
Okay.
I'm not saying it would necessarily be consistent. The finding would be consistent, but yes, they could potentially be at a qualifying intersection that's not listed in the community plan.
Okay.
But that's how it is today as well.
All right. Appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Yvonne, for that comment. Before we go back to some of the questions and comments that were placed in the chat, I wanted to, and I'm sorry, I'm going to skip you in line real quick, Isabel, Albert, because I know the Keystone Civic Association had their hand raised for a long time, but it looks like they dropped out for the meeting for a second or had unraised their hand, but now their hand is back up. So I just want to give them an opportunity to speak on their behalf. So if you want to unmute yourself, the Keystone Civic Association, thank you so much for coming.
Did that work?
Yes, that works. Thank you so much.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. I'm Clara Lawhead, and again, there's about 25 or 30 of us on this call, quite a few at the library in Citrus Park. Our library is closed. We want to make a couple points to you that we'd like for you to consider. One, I'd like to have you talk about traffic patterns and how they have been studied, if they have been studied or will be studied in terms of how these potential services may come into a community. Keystone is a major windy road, 2-lane highway community, very, very rural. And so traffic patterns can become extremely difficult and important and can become unsafe if not properly managed. As to the issue of services that we need, several folks have pointed out to me that we have 2 hospitals within 9 miles. We've got a shopping malls within 4 miles, and these are within the center of Keystone. We have 2 car washes under 4 miles and a pharmacy, 6 of them under 5 miles, a farmer's market. We have 4 barbershops and hair salons within 4 miles. Pet stores, we have 3 under 10. Veterinarians, we have 4 under 10. Liquor stores, we have 3 under 4. Automotive repair, we have 3 within 4.2. And Costco is 7 miles, and Winn-Dixie's in our heart. So we often we do feel that we have all the services that we need, and we'd like to be assured that the community plan will be upheld, which we know you've said very, very eloquently. But in the future, if the community plan, when it is revisited, that this be part of the permanent record. Also want to talk about low lighting, if you would address that again real briefly. I know our community plan talks about low lighting so that we're not getting light pollution. And we understand the whole issue of competition. It's not like Keystone is trying to prevent competition. We are simply trying to maintain the rural structure and the rural structure that exists today. So those issues about safety and traffic patterns, lighting, and